This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Well, I mean,
What are we don't even know what we're talking about yet.
That's okay too. Sometimes those are fun. I knew when I came to Phoenix that this was going to be my last tour.
Yeah.
And I also knew that in about 2012, 2013 timeframe, on my last deployment, that's when the Air Force, just my mentality towards the Air Force and what I did and that path, it changed for me, and it stopped becoming so much of a lifestyle and it started becoming more of a job. And that's kind of when I knew. The thing about the Phoenix move, though, was it was very unique. Not a lot of people have gotten that opportunity to come down here and do that kind of that cross flow that I got to do. So that was unique. We'd never been to Phoenix before. I got to fly F-16s and meet cool people and a whole new culture with the Singapore dudes and all that. So that was kind of neat. And we were looking at it, honestly, from a retirement standpoint, going life after the Air Force would probably be better in Phoenix than in Idaho. And that's kind of where that decision came from. I knew when I checked into the 425th, that was it for me.
Yeah.
The only question then was when.
When.
And then that shit went down, and that kind of made the decision for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, man.
Yeah. And then for you, you'd probably gotten to a point where, like, what else are you going to accomplish?
Well,
and how much time does that take?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, when we were coming to Phoenix, I wasn't sure because I just got by name requested to come. I got out of PACOM a year early because I got BNR'd to come be a DO in the 308th. And when I got there, the plan for me with the OG at the time was because the 308th had a small window. We were a year and a half before that squadron was shutting down, right? So I kind of finished up a class, had one full class, and then we were taking jets to Holloman. And I was supposed to go take one of the F-35 squadrons. The plan for me was going to be DO in the Spikes and then transition over and commander in one of the F-35 squadrons. Well, we get a new OG, and he changes all of that.
Was that Bach?
No, that wasn't Bach. That was the guy before
the dude before Bach.
Yeah, whatever his name was.
I only knew him for like a month.
Yeah.
So
and he was horrible. He was a horrible OG. Which is probably good that I can't remember his name. So, anyways, I get pulled over to be the director of staff for roles, which was fine. And then I was being told the whole time I'm taking the 310th. I mean, they even put me through the FAC upgrade just so I could be FAC qualified because I was supposed to be the commander in the 310th.
Were you not FAC qualified coming out of weapons school?
I was not. No.
I thought that would be a thing.
No, you only do the FAC section of the CAS phase at weapons school if you're FAC qualified.
Gotcha.
And not many of us are. It's a
well, what
really
do you do
small...
if you're not FAC qualified? Just fuck off in the bar for 2 weeks?
It's just you're just doing CAS sorties. So in the CAS phase, if you're FAC qualified, then you FAC in the CAS phase as well as fly some specific CAS. They've kind of got a little different syllabus for somebody who's FAC qualified during the CAS phase.
Yeah.
So
forward air controller, airborne. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the FAC was fun. I'm glad I got to do that upgrade. But then I'm on leave and I get the phone call that I'm taking the 425th. And so which was fine. I mean, that ended
What
up
was
being a
what was that initial? What was your initial response to that though? Because that probably wasn't where your mindset was.
no, it wasn't
So
at
it was
all.
kind
I
of
mean, I had even
a
the
big
vice wing
question mark,
commander
right?
before I went on leave. We were actually in California, I think, like in San Diego or something. And the vice wing commander before I left was basically telling me, not 3-4 days before this, that I was taking the 310th. And
Yeah.
then I get the call from the OG and he congratulates me on the 425th. So I was shocked at first, honestly.
Yeah.
And there was some gnashing of teeth, but I mean, I wasn't disappointed
What?
necessarily because, uh, you know,
Well, hold up. Was there gnashing of teeth because it wasn't what you expected, or because of the two different mission sets?
yeah, well, it wasn't even really gnashing of teeth for me necessarily. Because like I think I was caught off guard by it initially. But when
Yeah.
I thought about it, I'm like, well, fuck, dude, I'll go fly Block 52s and I'll do operational instead of B Corps stuff all day long. Are you kidding me? And so
Yeah.
there were some unique opportunities and some unique challenges that went along with that. And what I didn't realize at the time, which I loved, was because I wasn't generating PFT for the Air Force in the 425th, nobody cared, right? Like I didn't have, nobody was in my chili.
Makes
Like
wing
I didn't
stand up
have,
really easy,
yeah,
doesn't
I didn't have the
it?
OG and, maintenance, and I didn't have a bunch of issues that a lot of the other guys had to deal
Right.
with because of that. So that
Yeah.
allowed me to really focus on the people more and the squadron more and
Yeah.
trying to remove roadblocks and barriers for the civilian staff and the maintenance guys and really teach, right? Really get the IP
Yeah.
cadre spun up and start doing what we were supposed to be doing down there all the time. So um yeah, anyways. And then at some point I just came to realize that, I was going to make 06. I was going to go to school next. Then I was going to be an OG somewhere and then a wing commander somewhere. To be competitive for GO, probably one of those two assignments was probably going to be a remote to stay
Mm.
competitive for general officer just for timeline purposes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't want to be gone from my family for
Yeah.
a
That's
year at a
tough,
time
man.
anymore. I didn't want to, and I kind of realized too that like the Air Force, I didn't feel like the Air Force wanted leaders and fighter pilots like me anymore.
Why
Like,
is that? Why did you feel like that?
well,
What led you to believe that?
because I got, I went off shot number one twice from my below the zone to lieutenant colonel and didn't get picked up on either one of them because I hadn't gone to school, because that was right in that
Hmm.
time frame where they switched, where education was masked and then they
Yeah.
brought it back, and I was a school select, and I'm like, well, I'm the weapons officer. I'm the wing weapons officer at Shaw. I'm working 16 hours a day. I'm getting ready to deploy downrange. I'm not I'm not going to
Yeah.
school right now. Sorry guys, right? So and then my two below for 06, I went off number 2 from Luke, which I didn't expect to get picked up going off number 2, but I didn't get picked up for that either. So I probably would have got picked up in my one below if I had not told the boss that I was planning on retiring.
Yeah. I
So
remember you and I having that conversation.
I
Yeah.
let them know that before they made those decisions so that they could give it to whoever wanted to continue down that path. So, I think the Air Force.
So your mind was pretty made up at that point, then.
Yeah, it was made up at that point. I mean, the
Yeah.
biggest thing was family and just some stability, especially because all of my kids were kind of getting into those high school years.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No,
and
I think that matters, dude.
yeah,
And there's a really good discussion. It's not even really an argument, but it's a good debate on, do you have kids early or do you wait a few years? Let's say like for Katie and I, we met when we were 20, we got married when we were 23. What if we would have waited until we were like, I don't know, 30 to have kids? I was just talking to a guy at work that's 33 and he's going to wait. He's got about another year left on his bachelor's degree. And then he said, then we're going to have kids. So, yeah, you're going to be 34 years old, dude. Like, you're going to be 50 when your kid gets his driver's license. Think about
yeah,
that for a second.
yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
nope,
there's not, but there's definitely trade-offs,
yeah,
and I don't necessarily regret the way that Katie and I did it. But then when you start looking at the end of that 20-year career, I've got a kid that had just moved out of the house that's trying to figure out what he's going to do as a young man. I've got a kid that's going into high school, and then a kid that's in 7th or 8th grade at the time. So really like tremendously pivotal points in all of their lives.
Yeah.
And to uproot them and keep moving them around, I didn't see the benefit for me career wise. I would have gone somewhere. I would probably end up being a DO or something like that. And understand too that for my timeline and my career trajectory, like anything over 03 was just gravy, man.
Yeah.
Like I never was super rank hungry or anything like that. I never was the guy that was chasing any of that shit. So once I made 04, I'm like, dude, I'm good, bro.
Yeah.
I don't need this shit anymore. Definitely don't need the headaches, and I don't need to torture my family with any of that crap anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I was never really chasing any of that stuff either, dude. I was just always trying to do the best job I could do wherever I was at the time. And unfortunately that didn't translate to like the accolades and the things that I accomplished in the places I was. Didn't translate to big Air Force sometimes.
Yeah.
And there's conversations that you and I can have offline about how like the board process works in the military, especially the Air Force and things like that I think are a little bit broken, but whatever.
Well, it's unfortunate that we get people in charge that kind of lose a little bit of that perspective, I think sometimes.
Yeah.
And they try to make apples look like oranges in a lot of ways. They'll take the finance officer, the contracting officer that's working straight 8s, and he's got all this time in the world to go and get these advanced degrees, and they'll compare them to the guys in the fighter squadrons who are working 12 to 15 hour days, coming in, dragging their ass every day by the end of the week. And the last thing that we want to do is go study more.
Right.
So I think that it's definitely not an apples comparison in a lot of ways. And until they figure out a way to equitably discriminate between those, which is contrary to everything that's going through society in the military right now with DEI and all that shit, so I don't know, man. I don't know if it's going to get better or not.
I don't know either. I've always been under the opinion that rated boards should be peer reviewed. So I think that rated boards should be made up of rated officers because we speak the language. We understand what OPRs look like, what bullet points mean, what you could have you could go to a board as a rated guy and not have a single pointy nose guy on that board.
Well, not only that, man, but I remember what it was like being an 03 in the scheduling shop.
Well, and if you've got a board that's mission support group 06s and things like that, who are pushing on all their people, you got to get a master's degree, this, that, and the other, and then they get a rated guy who's got all everything but the education. I mean, what are they going to do? So it's just, plus when we talk about it all the time with like, dude, you build a reputation, and if you go to a rated board, the guys that are sitting there, especially as you get up in rank, you've probably crossed paths with them, or there's going to be 1 or 2 dudes on that board that have had exposure to you, and they're going to know who the good guys are and who the not so good guys are, regardless of what the OPR says. And I think you'd get much better decision points out of that for who gets picked below the zone and all that stuff. But whatever, it doesn't. Well, no,
but there's a lot of that common understanding too that I think it's missed. Like that MSG commander sitting on the board, he's never been scheduler of the week and have an upgrade sortie on Monday.
Yeah.
He's never gone through a 4-flug or an instructor upgrade.
Yeah.
He's never been in the Stanoval office and then, have to turn around and study because he's going through MQT or something weird like that. So I just,
and how many of those guys have any understanding of what weapons school is?
Yeah.
Or what that process is like?
The selection criteria, and I think that gets lost. I think it gets lost sometimes on even in society. When you take a look at the military in general, and then you start to tier out the different teams in that and recognize the percentage of 1% that we actually were. It's hard for us to relate, I think, a lot of times to, general civilian people who've never been around the military before. you know, you see that some in your career field, man, where you fly with guys who weren't in the
Oh
military.
yeah.
And I definitely see that with some people around town that I hang out with. It's hard to have conversations with them because they just don't have that experience that we had.
Yeah. No, that's 100% spot on, dude.
Yeah, that's tough, dude. And we were talking a little bit earlier about quitting. That's what got us off on this conversation, you know,
Yeah.
quitting the Air Force and when do you quit? I don't know if it was, I don't know, man, at the end of 20 years, you could definitely look at that and be like, dude, I paid my time, you know, and I don't know if that's quitting per se. I don't even know if I'd call it a pivot. I don't know what I'd call it right now. I haven't really thought through it, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. I think I'd call it a transition. I think you have,
careful how you use that word.
yeah, well, but I do. I think you have major, I mean, I think we all have transitions that we go through in life and, you know, that are pretty significant, whether they're,
Yeah.
you know, personally or professionally. Um, uh, yeah, but like like we were talking about, is it quitting? I mean, you're hanging it up. But I
Yeah.
also, you know, priority shift, right? So, like, when we talk about goal planning, you know, we talk about reassessing goals, and we talk about, you know, are you, are you making the ends that you want to make in this goal? Do you need to adjust certain things and things like that? You know, and I think just as you get older too, sometimes your priorities just shift a little. I know that definitely happened for me.
Yeah.
You know, I was at a point in my life where I wanted more time with my family and I wanted more control. The problem with becoming an O6 in the Air Force, dude, is once you make O6, the Colonel's Board owns your life. They can send you wherever they want, whenever they want. There's no 3-year assignments. I mean, you could show up one place and 3 months later, they could be sending you somewhere else if they need to. It's demands of the Air Force, right? And so you have to give
Yeah.
up, you know, freedom to a certain extent, and you know, even flexibility for your family to a certain extent to walk that path. And I wasn't prepared to do that anymore.
Dude, that is so valid too, man. And what I was just thinking while you were talking before you said that part was, how weird was it at the very end there when you actually have a choice?
Yeah.
Like, for the first time in
Yeah.
20 years, I can make, well, I mean, for the second time for me, because I made a choice to cross sides. I actually had separation paperwork in my hand when I accepted OTS. I had a separation date and everything. But you know, you're sitting there at the end of 20 years and you have a choice now. And that's a hard decision for my entire adult life. Somebody had told me where to work, what to wear, when to wake up, where to go, what to eat, you know, all that stuff. And now you're faced with a decision that's a little daunting,
Yeah.
especially for this very specific scenario that I was in. That was a really tough decision because it's like, well, now what? You know, what the hell am I
Exactly.
going to do at Luke Air Force Base? You
Yeah.
know, and there are a lot of options out there, and I'm not quibbling at all. And I'm not going to compare pilots and Wizzos in that regard, because I think for guys who are in pointy nose cockpits, there's a lot of really good work out there.
Yeah.
Oh, boo hoo, Wizzos can't go to the fucking airline. So what, dude? There's a lot of really good, fulfilling work out there if you're willing to go and get it.
Yeah.
I got lucky and I found it here at Luke.
Yeah.
But I see stuff on the job boards all the time popping up asking for, you know, experienced 1,000-hour rated instructors, you know, and if you're willing to jump around a little bit, man, you can do some really cool shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that transition period too can be scary because it's that unknown piece, right? Like you kind of know where you want to go, but like even for me going to the airlines, knowing that was kind of going to be the path that I tried first. I didn't know if I was going to like it. I didn't know if anybody was going to, I knew I had the qualifications, but I didn't know. I mean, you got
Bro,
to
I remember this conversation in your office.
Yeah. You know, you got to interview and you got to convince people that you're good enough and that you're likable enough to go sit in a cockpit for 3 days with people at a time. And,
that's
you
not
know,
the part of the conversation I remember, though.
What's the part
I
of the
remember the conversation. I remember us sitting there, doors shut, Jack and Cokes, and you going, Roscoe, where am I going to find the rage?
Oh, yeah.
when I go to the airlines.
Yeah.
It wasn't the qualification. It wasn't the flying piece of it. It was the
No.
adrenaline. It was the
Yeah.
bravado. It was that looking across the table at another dude going, I'm going to beat you today.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you didn't, you come back and you humbly accepted your, you know, your slice of the debrief, and you said, all right, I'm going to get better and I'm going to come back and do it again tomorrow. You know?
Yeah. Well, that was always when I did come up on opportunities earlier in the Air Force to get out, that's the reason I didn't, was because I knew it wasn't out of my system. Like, I knew that tactical piece of me still had development to do. I still had something to give. I still had teaching I wanted to accomplish. I still had, you know, people that I wanted to impact and influence.
Yeah, it's hard.
And so, but I also was recognized, you know, once you hit 05 and you do squadron command, basically everything after that, you're not that guy anymore, right? You're not.
You kind of almost become a politician in a way. You're kind of a nonner, you know?
Yeah, and you're
I'd
not
say
the most
OG is
tactically proficient dude anymore. You're not the guy that they're, you know, that they need to teach the student who's really struggling, or, you know, that's up to speed on all the new tactics.
No.
You know,
nobody's putting
stuff,
the OG on TI-1.
No.
You know? Yeah. You might fly as number 3 on
or
TI-6.
on the first wave, but, you know, you're not leading the first 4-ship across the line.
You know, and that's unfortunate the way that our system is built. You know, you get to a point where the OG is probably he's probably the last point that's somewhat tactical.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's, you know, even an 06 who's not in that position is not going to have that level of connection to the rest of the people and the squadrons and the flying, you know, and, you know, OGs might fly once a week, you know, go to a sim once a month, something like that. So it's not even, you're not carrying around this gross level of proficiency. And you start to lose a little bit of the touch with the, you know, the captains and the younger guys who are singing songs in the bar and leading the 4 ships and doing all that.
Can't even be in there most of the time anymore, you know?
Well, for plausible deniability.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're kind of, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but you're kind of becoming part of the problem at that point, at least from the way that we looked at it when we were younger. You know, you look at the guys, the 06s and above, and many of the 05s as well, they drank the Kool-Aid. You know, it's naturally, though, if they're aspiring to those things in their careers, they're going to have to do those
because
things,
you shift to managing organizations, you know, basically is what it comes down to.
You're managing systems and organizations, and you're not really leading people.
No, not necessarily.
And that's, I think that's a common misconception with some of the civilians out there who aren't really privy to a lot of the military. You know, you look at the generals on TV and you go like, oh, look at all the ribbons on his chest. He must be a great leader. Dude, he hasn't fucking led people in 10 or 15 years. You know, he's drinking coffee with other generals. And
we had an 06 at Shaw, and it was interesting because he was a weapons officer. He had graduated from the weapons school in the Viper, and he didn't wear the patch anymore. And we were in the bar one day, and I was talking to him, and I knew he had been a patch. And and I just asked him, I said, dude, why don't you wear your patch at all anymore? And he goes, because, man, I'm not that guy anymore. He's like, he's like, I'm not that tactically proficient. And he goes, and the problem with that patch is I walk into a squadron and people think that I know things, and I don't. I don't know them anymore. And he's like, so, you know, random guys will walk up to me and start asking me questions. And I'm like, you need to talk to your patch about that. I'm not sure, you know. He's like, so I finally just took it off.
I'll help you out with your next OPR, but I'm not. So, I'm not going to tell you how to target that bunker.
I thought that was funny.
But hey, though, respect to that dude for the humility piece of it, though, and knowing himself and knowing where he fit into, you know, the bigger picture. Because how many people don't do that?
Yeah,
you know, how many people try to? What do you say? The guy off of fucking Napoleon Dynamite.
Uncle Rico
in high school, Dave, you know,
Uncle Rico,
you know, like, oh yeah, you know, I did this when I was coaching football. I'm guilty of it, man. I would go out there and I would try to kick the football as far as the kids did and throw the football as hard as the kids did and all that. And I end up throwing my fucking shoulder out and breaking my back. And, you know, then I look like an idiot. But, you know, many of those dudes that, you know, maybe are graduated 05, graduated squadron commander, who's in a staff job, kind of a lame duck dude. He's maybe going to try to still be that guy, or, you know, a deputy OG or an OG who's been out of the game for a little bit. Bro, you might still have that little bit of credibility that just comes with your rank. right, and experience, and you might still have a little bit of that humility, but I mean, you're not the pointy end anymore, man.
Well, you don't have the time for it, right? Like you're
Nobody expects you to
focusing.
be.
Yeah, well, and at that level, right, their focus and everything is pulled in other directions, and it's not
Yeah.
about being the most tactical dude anymore or the best fighter pilot in the squadron. It's about whatever it is that they're doing. So anyway,
Well, when I took Caleb over to the Wing King's office a couple of years ago to try to get a letter of recommendation for the academy.
yeah,
And we were about close to 30 minutes late getting into his office with him because he was in a staff meeting discussing base housing.
yeah.
Like, that's something that, in the
Those when
scheduling
I was
shop
the
of a
director
fighter
of staff.
squadron, we don't give a fuck about
Yeah,
base housing.
I sat in those meetings when I was the director of staff, and so
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just, you're pulled in so many different directions. And, we sit here and it's politics season. This is great. And we're all enjoying the show. Get your popcorn because it's not going to be over anytime soon. It's going to just get more and more interesting. But, when you look at the job of somebody like that, of the president of the United States, man, how many different directions is that dude getting pulled every 10 minutes of the day?
oh yeah, for
Like,
sure.
I couldn't imagine, man, like the amount of compartmentalization that has to go on.
Yeah.
And just moving from one topic to
Well,
the
that's why
next
they have the
throughout the
staffs
day.
they do. That's why they all have the staffs they do. It's so that
I know, but you're still the dude.
yeah, you're the decision
know?
maker, but you're not coming up with those things on your own for the most part. You may be driving things in a certain direction, but they're not. They're taking input from hopefully taking input from all of the experts in the fields that they're not experts.
What about just going from meeting to meeting though?
It'd be
Like,
exhausting.
okay, right now for the next 20 minutes, I'm meeting with the head of the CIA and the NSA, and we're going to talk about this shit.
Yeah,
And
well, I
then,
think
here comes the Department of fucking Treasury to come in and talk about who we want to put on the next dollar bill.
It's
and
endless briefings. I think I've heard that like the president's day is basically blocked into 5-minute chunks, and that's how they build his schedule. So
God,
it's all accounted for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if you're Joe Biden, it's probably not that bad because your day ends at like 3 at nap time or whatever. But
you have to build.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a dig, but it was a funny one. Yeah, go ahead.
Anyways, no, go ahead.
Nah, I'm just sitting here bullshitting, man. We're life at the end of the Air Force. What about life at the beginning of the Air Force when if you're starting out in a goal? I remember when I started out, man, I was full of piss and vinegar, dude, and I was just having this conversation with Tyler the other night on Sunday night. We talked for like an hour because he's getting very close. He's getting right at the end of the police academy, and I don't know, for 3 or 4 weeks now, they've been doing all the cool guy shit. Like this week, I think he was getting maced and tased.
Nice.
Was his 2 big events this week, and he went through the defensive driving. They went through some takedown jiu-jitsu type shit. I mean, they're doing cool guy stuff now, right? And we started talking about what is his next year, next 3 years, next 5 years. What do they look like? What are some of the opportunities that are out there and all that? And he started laying out these ideas that he has for, well, I think I might want to do this eventually or do that. And I was like, bro, like, first of all, good. You always need an idea of where you're headed, but you kind of have to bloom where you're planted. Like you were saying this earlier about just doing the best job you can where you're at. You kind of have to bloom where you're planted, because if you don't, then you're not even going to get looked at for that other stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's challenging, when you start out in a career like the military or the police force or something like that, that there's a kind of a roadmap laid out in front of you. And there's these cool detours that you can take here or there, but you really kind of have to stay focused on just what's 5 feet in front of me, man. What's the closest alligator to the boat?
I would say, well, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, if you're a younger man and you're listening to whatever the fuck it is that we're talking about, because I don't even know.
The no topic episode. That'll be the name of this one. No topic.
Like, dude, when you're young, like that is your time to spend the time and get serious about building skills. Like if you know what you want to do, or you're already established, or you're becoming established somewhere, that's where you invest time up front, right? That's
put
the bullshit aside and focus on building the reputation that you want to have in whatever industry or profession that you're working in, and build the skills, right? Because you're never going to have more time than you do now. Because you go back to the kids comment, right? Do you have kids earlier? Do you have kids later? Well, I mean, that's a personal choice. I'm very happy that I had my kids early. I will say that it also made it very difficult at times when I was going through. I mean, you know, I had my first, David was born in pilot training at the beginning of Tweets. Carly was born when I was in the B course for the Viper. Danny was born when I was starting my iPug at Shaw. Like it was horrible,
Yeah.
man. You know, I learned how to do a lot with very little sleep for a very long time. And I had to get really good at time management and prioritizing and forcing myself to do stuff a lot of times. But I'm happy about it now because I'm in my prime earning years. I'm 51 years old, and I can still do the things that I want to do, and I have the income to do it. So, and my kids are out of the house, so I have a lot of
You're
flexibility now.
young and healthy, and that's what it came down to for me too. When I look back, is like when I was younger, dude. Even if Katie and I hadn't had kids, I was a fucking senior airman, man. I wouldn't have had the money to go and travel and do the cool things that I can do now. So, fuck it, we might as well have the kids. And we had 3 when I went to flight school. Caleb had just been born; he was 6 months old when I graduated OTS.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there doing charts and shit in flight school with bouncing a kid on my knee.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if you're young, man, like take this opportunity and time to build skills and to get good at what you're trying to do. Start to build that reputation for yourself, because that'll pay off for you down the road for sure, especially as life becomes a little more hectic or demanding, or priorities start to shift, you know, as you start a family, or, you know, get married, or whatever the case may be. So, but yeah, I mean, going back to the pilot training example too, and we were just talking about like, when do you quit? I think sometimes too, and like we were talking about, like quitting is, I don't know, you know, like there were guys in my pilot training class that SIE, self-induced elimination, you know, in Tweets. And one of them was a cat who had like 1,200 hours of civilian flying time.
That's tough, man.
But I think, you know, sometimes when you get into certain situations, because you don't know exactly maybe what it all entails, when you get there, you have the opportunity to recognize, do I really have the skill set for this? Or to even ask the question of, is this really the direction that I want to go with my life? And for that particular individual who I was good friends with at the time, we talked a lot about his decision, and, you know, it was a good decision for him, man, because I don't think he felt like he had the ability to do what was going to have to be done for the next 10 months and beyond, you know, day in and day out, to get to the place that we were all trying to go. Does that make sense? And so for him,
it totally does, man.
For him, it was a pivot, you know, and he ended up going to medical school and becoming a doctor, and super smart guy, right? And I'm sure very happy in the direction that he went, but definitely had to quit or give up on that dream. You know, for him, I think it was more of a pivot and just a recognition that, you know, once he had gotten there, that it wasn't exactly what he thought it was going to be. But I think
that's valid.
That's valid. That's a good time to go. Yeah, you know, I need to shift my goals, and I need to look for different opportunities, because this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I got another side to that coin where, you know, we're in flight school, and for our track, first of all, it was competitive to get to Pensacola. Just to get to Pensacola, you knew that you were either going to get Strike Eagles or B1s.
Yeah.
And the Strike pipeline was about 2 or 3 months longer than the B1 pipeline. You basically didn't have to do the advanced portion of it in the T-39s. And there were guys that showed up there that were in my class, and we went through the whole thing together, and the whole time they're Strike Eagles, Strike Eagles, Strike Eagles. Oh, it's badass. We're going to be Strike Eagle dudes, and da-da-da. And then they realized that flight school was hard, and somewhere along the way, they were tired of going to school.
Yeah.
And they made that decision based on that.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, you're not willing to suffer for 2 or 3 more months. You're willing to give all that up for 2 months of school?
Yeah.
Like, I get it. It's tough. It's difficult. It's challenging. But man, I mean, you're talking about for the next 20 years for some of these kids,
Yeah.
and that's the part that I think is, I don't know, man. I think that there maybe could have been some more thought into that decision for them.
Yeah. Well, I
Then
think
again, I
you
don't
have
know
to
what their
be.
circumstance
I
was,
think you have to be really transparent with yourself in situations like that, and you have to be really honest. Because especially when you're younger, I think it's easy to be short-sighted in scenarios like that because you don't know what you don't know. You don't really know what you're giving up potentially by making that decision. Because you don't know
Yeah.
what it's like to be in the Strike Eagle versus the B1. You don't know what
Yeah.
environment or what culture is going to fit you better necessarily. I didn't have any fucking idea when I was going through pilot training what I wanted to fly or what community I thought I would fit best. I had no idea, man.
Yeah.
So it
No, I think those dudes, and it sounds bad when I say it this way, but I think they took the easy way out. And I wonder because, a couple of those guys were up in the top echelons of the class, the top, 2 or 3 people in the class. It's not like they didn't have the
requisite
intellect or
skill
the
sets.
ability to
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. And none of the guys that I'm speaking of right now, without really thinking about it, but none of them were married and had kids or anything. And so me and a couple of the other prior enlisted married guys with kids are kind of sitting there going, dude, what the heck, man? Now, maybe we had a different perspective in it because we were looking at it from that lens,
Yeah.
So I think there's maybe a lot that goes into that decision, but one of them did very well. The other one, he kind of fizzled out and he ended up separating, but
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't for him. Like your example, maybe it just wasn't
maybe the
for
goal
him.
just wasn't
But
that important to them. Maybe the goal was just getting through, Wizzo school
yeah,
and getting to a platform, and it wasn't really as big of a deal. But it always comes back to what we say, which is if you want, if you want to get to some place specific, you're going to have to. There's hard work involved, right? There's going to be
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
effort.
You got to
There's
work
going to be
for
a
it.
lot of sacrifice. And it's tough. Sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah, you got to work hard and not suck.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
You do indeed.
It was there a second ago. I swear to God, it was there.
We had 2 guys in my pilot training class that were probably going to wash out in 38s if they didn't get, because I went to Shepherd, which all the drops for like 5 years had been nothing but fighters, right? And we had 2 guys in 38s that were going to probably wash out, and they ended up getting 2 B1s in the drop for them. And that's the only way that's the only reason they made it through pilot training, from what I was told. So
I remember what I was going to say now. What we're talking about in that example, though, is the guy that we were talking about with Doc John, the dude who just kind of ends up here.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I was super talented. Maybe I was just able to. Maybe I had a photographic memory, and up to a point, you can kind of get by on that.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, you're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time, which is why we all laugh at people when they get to PFM because, wait, I've got to pull G's and talk on the radios?
Yeah. And keep sight.
Yeah, right. This is bullshit. I just want to do loops. But yeah, I mean, those guys do exist, man. I think they exist everywhere. They just kind of slip through the cracks isn't the right term, but you kind of get the point when I say that. They just kind of ride the wave, man. They just end up here, and they never really had that burning passion for it. Like at a young age, like sitting out in the cotton field and watching airplanes fly around. They never had that. It was just like, oh, that looks cool. Let me try that.
Yeah, well, skill will only get you so far, right? Which is why you want to find things that you're good at and then pursue those things. Because if you have, certain skills, you can really excel in different professions or different areas of expertise with certain skill sets, right? And so, but
like you got to have a passion for it.
Well, you do, but you've got to have the attitude and the effort for it too. Which I think is what you're saying, right? If you don't have the passion for it, you're probably not going to have the attitude or have the desire to put the additional effort in to be really good at it.
That's really what it comes down to is like you look at all the hard work that we put in just day in, day out in a fighter squadron. But at the time, it never really seemed like hard work. It was just like, man, this is just what we do.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I really don't think, or I think if you don't have that passion for it, if it's not like part of who you are and like part of your, it sounds cheesy, but part of your destiny, man, then you're just not going to put in that level of effort for it, or it's always going to be work and you're never going to really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be value added, and if you're not, then people are going to see that too. I think that's one of the things that drove a lot of guys in the fighter squadron was you want to be value added. You want to be, when you're a wingman, you want to be the guy that guys want to have on their wing. When you're a flight lead, you want to be the guy that guys want to be on their wing. When you're an instructor, you want to be the guy that guys come to with questions and hope that they fly with you, because they know they're going to learn, and they're going to learn stuff well in the right way. And all of that is because you just want to be a value added member of the squadron, of that community, right? You want to do well.
Yeah.
So
do you think that we had maybe a little bit of an advantage because we were a little bit older?
I think so. I think
we had a little bit more life experience.
Yeah, I think I know for me in particular, being a little bit older, having worked in the civilian sector, it definitely gave me, I don't know if it was an advantage, but I didn't have the same level of immaturity that some of the guys that were in my peer group,
Oh yeah, I definitely can't say that. I'm still super immature.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, I mean, I just, I wasn't going out and getting stupid drunk and doing stupid shit and playing stupid games around the squadron. I was putting in the requisite effort, and whether it was, the flying side of the house or on the Queeby side of the house with whatever squadron duties I had, So I think being a little older definitely helped in that respect.
And that's why you're such a better person than I am, because I got 2 LOCs in my career and they were both for fucking off when I shouldn't have been fucking off.
Yeah. That's typically where they happen.
It's funny. I mean, I was the guy that stole the other squadron's car and took it on a TDY with us. So
yeah.
Anyways, I know I've told that story. It didn't end well.
Yeah, but I never played it. I never did a lot of the reindeer games. That's just not my personality anyways. But
yeah, no, I agree. I think being a little bit older, maybe a little bit more mature, however we're going to loosely define that, but having that life experience and kind of knowing, I've been there. I've been a young man. I've been a young airman. I've done all that kind of fun young guy stuff. Now I've got a wife and I've got kids, and maybe it did bring just a little bit more focus and a little bit more drive, because I knew it wasn't just me that was along for this ride.
Yeah.
But I also was a lot more, I think I was mature enough to handle the level of determination that it was going to take. I don't know if I would have been able to do that when I was 22 or 23 because of the lack of maturity, maybe that lack of perspective. I think that being a little bit older gave me that vision to be able to say, look, dude, like, this is something I really want, for one. And I recognize it's going to be difficult. So it's time to just fucking put the blinders on, embrace the suck, and mow through this.
Yeah.
And not like a certain level of sport bitching it's a prerequisite in these career fields. You have to. But when it becomes griping and complaining all the time, dude, I just don't know that I could subscribe to that in that moment, because I knew I knew what it was going to take to get to where I wanted to be.
Yeah. I was very driven, and I've always had a lot of self-confidence. Not ego like driven self-confidence, but I've always been a pretty self-confident person.
Yeah.
And I think that helped me tremendously in, my career and in all of my different, formal upgrade programs and things like that. So, yeah,
that's a good thing. And there's a distinction, I think, too, between what you were saying, the person who's maybe ego driven versus the guy who's just super confident about himself. And some of that comes with the ability to back that shit up.
It does. Like, you have to be good.
Yeah.
You have to put the work and the effort in to be good. But like, that self-confidence for me though too was just like having, I could have thick skin. I could raise my hand and say, yeah, I fucked that up, and teach me how to do it better, and not be the guys that we'd have sometimes, who are like in the debrief hoping people don't recognize when they make mistakes or something like that, because they don't want to be called out, or they take that as negative, somehow as negative, right? When we all fuck up, we all make mistakes, right? The lesson's in the failure. And you get better by having people debrief you around those things, right? Or recognizing that stuff, owning up to it, and then figuring out how not to fuck it up the next time. Like, that's how you get better.
Well, I think this ties in nicely when we started talking about the excuse me, start talking about the when do you hang them up? When you just say, you know what, this ain't for me, or I'm going to try something different. If it's something that's very new to you, I think going into it with the right attitude and mindset of, man, this is I'm likely going to fuck this up. Like, I don't think I've ever picked up my guitar and said, I'm going to nail this fucking song on the first try. No,
Right.
man, it takes a long time to do these things. And I've been playing guitar for years. Right. And it's an easy analogy when you start talking about picking up something brand new from scratch. Like, say that you wanted to sit down and learn Russian. Do you speak Russian?
No.
Okay. You want to sit down and learn Russian. Do you think that you're going to be holding a conversation tomorrow?
No.
Probably not. I think that's the realistic, safe bet. Like, I'd probably bet my next paycheck that you won't be holding a conversation in Russian tomorrow.
Yeah.
But give you 6 months, man. Maybe Russian's not your thing. Maybe you can't, like Katie, we were laughing when we were in Norway. They were trying to help her pronounce some of the words, and some of them in their dialect, you have to roll your R's with your tongue, and she can't do that. And so it just comes out sounding like, oh, of course we're laughing our asses off. But, if you can't roll your R's, if you have like a physical limitation that won't let you do something, then maybe you do have to look at it and go, man, this maybe this ain't for me.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at before too, right? Like with the guy in pilot training. I mean, you may think that you have requisite skill sets to go do something, and then you may get there and realize that you don't, right? It's kind of like when you talk about when you're the best player on your high school football team, and then you go to the college level. Well, guess what? Everybody else on that team was the best player on their football team too.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Right, like that.
Yep.
Every time you fleet up, you're in that next category where everybody else has done what you've done, and you have to prove yourself again, right? You have to find ways to separate yourself, whether that's through preparation or integrity, honesty, whatever the case may be. And so, but yeah, you may get to a place where you realize that what you thought you wanted to do or the skills that you thought you had, you don't have. So you have two options there. You can either work to develop them, or maybe that's where you make a pivot, or maybe that's where you go, it's time to hang it up here and go find a different opportunity.
No, I mean, I was literally just having this conversation with Tyler about kind of the same thing. I said, dude, I mean, in your peer group, in your force and your team, whatever you're assigned to, there's going to be a number one guy and there's going to be a number last guy, and where you fall on that list is largely up to you.
It's completely up to you.
Now, there is some subjectivity into it. Inevitably there always is. There's a good old boy crew, or, your personality will carry you or something like that. But when it comes right down to it, man, you are largely in control of where you fall on that list to a certain degree. And in order for you to open up some of these doors down the road, that's going to be very important. Well, how do you secure a high enough number on that list to get some of these recommendations? It's by focusing on what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And if you identify, or somebody identifies for you, a weak spot, dude, work on that, man. If you can't do pull-ups, then go do more pull-ups, man.
Yeah.
If you suck at driving your patrol car, then take a fucking driving class. I mean, there's ways that you can overcome and minimize those weaknesses to bolster that. And the other thing I told him too, that I think is, something that we don't talk about nearly enough, but it's networking. He's in a unique opportunity cruising around a patrol car with a badge on. He's got instant credibility, and he's instantly recognizable to everyone. They look at that and they go, oh, well, we know that that's a police officer. They don't know him necessarily, but they know that he got to that point by doing a certain amount of things, right? But he's also got a key to every police department in the city. He can walk into the courthouse whenever he wants to. He can go into any sheriff's department or fire department. He can walk into any hospital and just start talking to people, and they will talk to him because he's wearing that uniform. I was like, dude, do you realize how awesome that is?
Yeah.
How many connections you can make? Like, he could probably walk up and meet the mayor next week if he wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
So I encouraged him, take advantage of every single opportunity you get to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Networking is super important, and I will tell you, I've never been very good at it because part of it's my introversion. Um,
Yeah.
and the fact that I just don't like people for the most part. Um, and completely suck at small talk. But building relationships and networking, especially professionally, is very important. And I can give you an example. And sometimes, you'll be able to build networks just because of people that you've worked with and relationships that you've built in places that you've been or the reputation that you have. Um, when we were talking about the Air Force stuff earlier, a lot of times once you get to that '06 level, a lot of it's who you know, right? It's not even really what
Yeah.
the work you do. It's, hey, who do I know that's up in the higher general officer ranks now that can open doors for me and get me into billets that
Right.
are going to help me
Yeah.
continue to advance my career, right? Um, but I took advantage of that when I was at Paycom working on the staff. I was coming up on I don't know, I'd been there about a year and a half, and I had just come back from JPME 2, so I had my joint credit. Well, I didn't. I technically you have to do 3 years, so I had to get a waiver to get my joint credit, which is important for general officer bullshit. But, anyways, and I was looking at all the wings, all the Viper wings, and dude, I didn't know a single fucking OG or wing commander that was sitting at a Viper wing in the Air Force. Not one.
Mm.
None of them had I ever crossed paths with. And so I reached out to a couple of former commanders that were '06s or above at the time and was just like, hey, what do I do? I want to get back to the jet. I'd like to get back to the jet as quickly as possible. What do I need to do? And they're like, so then they go, well, hold on a second. Let us look at the lists. And they look and they go, okay, well, I know this guy over here and I know this guy over here and I know that guy over there. They're like, we'll send them emails for you. So they fired out a couple emails, and like 3 days later, I get an email from the OG at Luke, who I did not know, but knew one of my former commanders really well.
There
They
you
had
go.
gone to weapons school together,
Yeah.
And he sets, he wants me to give him a call. So we set up a time to have a phone call and a phone conversation. And I get on the phone with him. We talk for like 45 minutes. And then he goes, okay, man, I'm going to BNR you to Luke. I want you to take it to 308. That's how I got my DO job.
Yeah.
And if I would have just sat there on my ass, I'd have spent 3 years at Paycom, and then who knows where I would have ended up.
Yeah, but there's so many good lessons in just that really short story, and that's, your reputation. And how do you build a reputation, and something else I was telling Tyler was, dude, like, I know I've given this example out before, but when we hire people for my job now, it's not based on your qualifications anymore, because everybody applying to this job, we're all the same.
Balls, yeah.
We're all old retired guys. We got thousands of hours, blah, 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 blah. Right. It's a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And the manager sticks his nugget out the window and goes, hey, does anybody know CAS? Yeah, CAS is an asshole. Cool. Not hiring CAS. And it's the exact same way. He's year one on the police force, man. This is where you start building your reputation.
Yeah.
You're the first in, last out. You're the guy that shows up for everything. You're the guy that does things right. And you've met the sheriff and you've met the mayor. And, 5 years down the road, Homeland comes calling and they say, hey, we need some guys to go, do cool Homeland shit. Oh, well, we got this dude over here. He's a rising star.
Yeah.
That's how you get those positions, man.
It is. Yeah. And that goes back to what we've said previously too, which is like, try to be consistent and do good work consistently, because you never know who's watching and you never know when you're going to cross paths with those people again. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Because, like even in my job now, if I wanted to go, and I believe it's like this at most airlines, but like if you want to go back and work at headquarters, whether it's in the training department or, in safety or some division of the airline industry, if you don't know anybody there that's, back there doing that stuff, the chance of you getting picked to go do it is 0 to none. Right. And so if I wanted to go ever do anything for the airline that I work for back at headquarters, I would have to reach out to people that I know people that are there to put in good words for me, because nobody knows who the fuck I am. Right. And
well, with all your experience and all of your accolades and plaques on the wall, it would be very difficult for you to get a job where I'm at.
Yeah.
Just because you've been out of the game for a little bit and nobody knows Cass Cooper anymore.
That's right.
And there's a lot of fresh faces on the block now, and
Yeah,
you don't necessarily have that instant credibility that you had 5 or 6 years
that's
ago
right. I
because you've
don't.
been out of the game for a little bit,
I have.
but that's okay. I mean, that's a natural evolution, you know.
So you won't
Um,
hire me, Roscoe? Is that what you're saying?
Dude, if it were up to me, I'd put you in the desk right next to me. Fuck, we'd share a desk. We could
Right on.
sit Pilot Wizzo style, man.
It'd be
We'd
awesome.
get we get a log and we just sit on it front to back tandem.
Sounds good.
The something else that I picked up in your story was when you reached out to the dude and he says, yeah, I'll put out some feelers and I'll make some intros for you and we'll see what we can hook up. He opened a door for you and you got a call back, but it was still up to you
Yep.
to walk through that door and close that deal.
Yeah.
And but that takes a certain amount of courage to be able to do that, to call a person that you've never met before. You have a mutual acquaintance and you're going to call this person and, I don't know, basically try to sell yourself to him, at least make a decent impression on him so that maybe he'll hold you in high enough regard to hire you.
Yeah.
And that's challenging.
It's
a challenging thing. I've done it a few times. And I think the more you do it, the more comfortable it gets, for sure, because you start to gain a little bit of confidence in yourself. You kind of know your elevator speech at some point, and the fact that you can sit there and talk to a guy for 45 minutes, I mean, that right there says something. Because he wouldn't have stayed on that long. He wouldn't have stayed on that line that long if there wasn't something there.
That's right. And it can be, it's intimidating and a little bit scary. But I think what's important, it goes back to self-inspection. Dude, if you know yourself well and you can show up and be genuine and authentic in a conversation with somebody, like, they're going to see it, right? Because I could have been like, well, I've done X and I've done Y and blah, 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 or I could have
Let
just
me send you my
like,
last 5 OPRs.
yeah,
and then
let
you
me
can
send
just
you
call
my
me later.
OPRs, or I could have just sat there and been silent and waited for him to ask me whatever questions he was going to ask me and been really weird about it, right? But no, I just, it was an opportunity, and I just tried to seize the opportunity and get an opportunity to kind of let him know who I was and what I was about and answer any questions that he had as authentically and genuinely as I could. And I was completely transparent with him about the things I've done and kind of my viewpoints on leadership with the questions that he asked me, and evidently he liked it. So, but it goes back to self-inspection, man. I think that's part of that. You can't have self-confidence if you're not comfortable with yourself. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you're about, and you don't know how you want to show up in certain situations, those things can be really intimidating.
Yeah. Well, and in that very same line of talking, there's got to be a little bit of a man in the arena, damn the torpedoes kind of mentality, because he might not have liked it.
Yeah.
And you don't know until you try.
That's right.
And that's the unfortunate part. And like I say all the time, man, I have an abrasive personality. A lot of people don't find that attractive. A lot of people don't like to keep company with a person that is as in your face sometimes as I can be. And that's okay. And I say all the time, I'm like, man, I'm sorry, I'm me. And it ain't for everybody, and I recognize that. So if I'd had that phone call with that same dude, I mean, I have to go into that knowing that there's a chance that he's going to pick up on some of that, and maybe it's not for him.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm going to try to not be that way with that guy, and situation dependent, but I'm also going to be me around the whole thing. And that was the one thing, man, that when I looked back on my career, Katie will tell you the same thing. When I look back on my career, I can confidently say that, dude, I was me the entire time.
Yeah.
I won some and I lost some, but I can walk away knowing that I was me.
Yep. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I learned more about myself in the process, and I think me as a person changed throughout that process.
Yeah, I agree.
But I always try to be very genuine and authentic for the most part, and not try to be something I wasn't.
Yeah, I'm sure you caught a lot more. You caught a lot more butterflies than I did.
Well,
but
it's just, it goes back to the maturity piece too, to a certain extent, Roscoe, because, I think sometimes those younger guys that are coming out of the academy who have been in the zoo for 4 years and it's their first taste of freedom, and they just fucking go wild dingo, right? And and they don't, they haven't been through enough stuff in life necessarily to know who they are, right? And so what are they doing? They walk around and they try to conform in certain ways to what they think they should be to fit in.
Well, they've been in prison for 4 years.
They have, and that's no hit on them, right? Like, we all do that. We all do that growing
Yeah.
up. We all, go, okay, well, how do I need to, what's the appropriate way to behave or respond or to act in these situations? I'll never forget, we had just started pilot training. I was one of the few guys in the class that was married, and we were sitting there in our service dress for some fucking briefing. It was like, the first week or whatever. And one of the academy kids is sitting behind me, and there's some kind of conversation going on. And he makes some snide comment about my wife at the time. Like, he wasn't trying to be a dick, but he was being a dick, right? Like something about, Cass's wife, this, that, or the other. It didn't say Cass, but Coop's wife, this, that, or the other. And I just turned around and I looked at him and I said, dude, you don't fucking know me that well. And you should have seen his face, but like,
you don't even know me, son.
Yeah, I'm like, you don't know me that well to be talking like that. So, but that's like, I bring that up because there's a distinction of, I think somebody who was probably nervous in the position that we were in was trying to make light of something, crack some jokes because he's feeling nervous or anxious or whatever. Right. But probably doesn't have a lot of self-awareness and doesn't know a lot about himself. And he's just trying to figure out, how do I fit into all this, And then there's me going, fuck you, son, don't talk like that. So,
well, that reminds me of when we went to Tyndall and you and Fuego were in the car, and he, like, the first words that Fuego ever says to me is a Wizzo joke, right? And it wasn't even a good joke. And I'm driving, you're in the passenger seat, he's in the back, and when he got done, I just kind of side-eyed you like that, and you just went real quick like that, and I was like, okay, I could stop the car and get out and drag Fuego out into the ditch real quick, or I could just say, dude, you need to work on your material, and just let it go, and then Fuego and I ended up being friends, and
Fuego was a good dude, and that was probably just him trying to break the ice, right?
He was. I know that about him now. I know his personality now, but come on, man, first impressions, bro.
Yeah, seriously, right? Yeah, we had like I've told you before, we had a conversation about that. So, but so I would just, for younger guys that are listening, they're like, watch out for those pitfalls. And again, this is why, like, that self-inspection and self-awareness stuff is so important, because if you don't really know who you are or how you want to show up, it's going to be tough to be genuine, authentic, and you're going to find yourself trying to conform to certain things. And sometimes those things aren't good, right? Or they put you in situations that aren't going to help you build a really good rapport with people. We give lieutenants a lot of cover in the Air Force, right? You're kind of, when you got the LPA badge on, the Lieutenant Protection Association badge on, you can do some stupid shit and get away with it for the most part.
Get away with some stuff.
But if it continues to happen repetitively, even when you're in the LPA, like, you start to build a reputation of being a fuck off, or being a shitty drunk, or whatever, and you don't want to go down those roads. So but I see that a lot in the squadrons with younger guys, trying to conform, drinking way more than their body was able to tolerate, and then getting real big in the britches because of it, and thinking that they could so
I think, just kind of in closing a little bit, I think that I would really hope that if I could mentor some of those kids, it would be like, dude, like, be in the moment. And don't miss the opportunity for real connections with real people.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean,
that's a great point.
I mean, first of all, get away from social media. Stop, don't use it for entertainment if you want to, but don't live your life through that lens.
Yeah.
Because most of it's fake, not real or negative. And then, on the real connections piece of it, like, seek real connections with real people around your squadrons, around your workplaces. And that's very different than just hanging out in the bar because that's what they expect lieutenants to do. No, man, like, you can actively use that time to go and get to know people and build relationships, and, and learn from someone, and learn who the guys are in the workspace that you admire and respect and look up to, and the ones that maybe you don't, because I think there's equal importance there, and so that would be something that I know I screwed that up from time to time, probably more often than not, is not utilizing that time that I was spending or wasting building those real connections and being in that moment. I think that I probably could have done that a little bit better.
And I think we all could. And the one thing that I would say, the flip side of that too, is if you're an older man or if you're in a position at work to be in a position to mentor people and you see people messing up, like take the opportunity to sit them down and have a conversation, like mentor. Because I'm sure you did that a ton. I can think of a million times that I did that in my Air Force career. Some of it, was small potatoes. Some of it wasn't. When I was at Shaw, we had a patch that had just gotten to one of the squadrons from the weapons school, and dude, he was on fire, right? Like just graduated, full of piss and vinegar. They go to a red flag, and he gets drunk one night at the club and gets into it with the commander, like in front of a bunch of dudes. And I hear about it through the grapevine. And so they get back from the flag, and I send him an email and I go, dude, you need to come by my office. We need to talk. So he doesn't know what we're talking about, right? He comes in there, and we had a really good, frank conversation for about an hour. And it was just about, look, young slick wing captain with a patch on your left shoulder, I don't think you recognize like what your fucking role is in the squadron. Like,
you're not there yet.
Yeah. Right. Like, this is what you don't understand about being a weapons officer is you have to play, you're kind of on a balance beam, because you want to be at the bro level and you want to be kind of connected into everything that's going on, but you're also kind of at a leadership level, and you kind of have to play that game with the leadership side too. And it's a tricky spot to be in sometimes, but you can't go full bro and you can't go full leadership, right? You kind of have to stay in the middle, bro. And so we had a really good conversation, and I think it helped them out, but so if you're in a position, I mean, I just bring that up because if you're in a position to mentor somebody who you see is screwing something up, or maybe consistently doing something that's building a reputation that's not good for them, maybe have the integrity and the courage to pull them aside and go, hey, I don't know if you know how this is being perceived, but let's have a conversation about this, because you could really save somebody and teach them a valuable lesson.
Yeah, you get good at that stuff over time too.
Yeah, well,
you do it a few times. You get good at recognizing who needs it. And
his squadron commander was the DO, and I was the ADO in the 55th, and his squadron commander was like, if I don't see a few changes from this kid in the next month or so, he's not going to be here much longer. So,
well, maybe he deserved that too.
He might have. He got it squared away.
Well, that's awesome. Cool, dude. 1:06. You got anything else?
No, the no topic show.
Yeah, no plan.
Yeah,
the no plan. I love that.
This might be why people don't listen anymore.
We're turning into the two old grumpy Muppets up in the top of the balcony. Get off my lawn.
The Grumpy Old Man Podcast.
All right. Yeah, we'll change the name. Rebranding. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right. We're up for ideas, new brands, new logos. If anybody wants to see the Grumpy Old Man Podcast, let us know.
Yeah.
So
we know some people.
I got the gray hair to go along with it.
Yeah, you and me both.
CAS still uses just for men, and with that, I'll say be the change.
Be the one.
All right. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.